Happy Monday, June 12th, 2023. Yes, we know 60 years ago, Medgar Evers was assassinated, and we honor his life. We honor his wife who carried on the wonderful work as Merle Evers Williams and their 3 children. And we want to make sure that we carry on the work. This is a week before Juneteenth. What are we going to do in this last week? Remember, that's when enslavement pretty much, in some forms, ended, even though the Emancipation Proclamation was signed months before that. But listen, what are we doing to show that we are truly free and we have liberty? And how are we trying to help others? Yeah, we have a week to do that, and we have the rest of our lives. All right, well, a book that I have never read, but I have an inspirational Barbie doll. Remember the African American series? I think I got this from Target. Yes, Ida B. Wells, journalist, activist, and suffragist. Let's read about her. I tell you, she was born into slavery 3 years before slavery ended in 1865. And she would later become a formidable activist for civil rights and women's suffrage. She started her career as a teacher and segued into journalism, where she gained national prominence. And we know that Congress Parkway is now Ida B. Wells Parkway downtown, just south of Van Buren. So check it out. She has done great things. But let's learn more about her as we listen to one of my favorite renditions of the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, by Cyrus Chestnut. Let the Truth Be Told, illustrated by Bonnie Christensen, and Walter Dean Myers wrote this. Didn't know it. Long before boycotts, sit-ins, and freedom rides, Ida B. Wells was hard at work to better the lives of African Americans. And wow, Walter Dean Myers, he's a New York Times best-selling and award-winning author. And the watercolors of Bonnie Christensen. Let's enjoy. Hopefully this will just be part 1. Oh, okay. Look at this, beautiful. Ida B. Wells was born on the 16th of July, 1862 in Holly Springs, Mississippi. The first child of James Wells and his wife Elizabeth, was beautiful, bright-eyed, and healthy. Still, there was much to worry about. James Wells, although a skilled carpenter, was legally a slave. Yeah, that's 1862. And so was his wife. 3 years later, the Constitution of the United States was changed. The 13th Amendment made slavery illegal. All the black people of Holly Springs were now free. Let's see the feels. Over the next few years, young Ida was joined by 3 brothers and 3 sisters. The Wells children were taught to be responsible for one another and the family home. Each child had chores to do around the house. When the Methodists started a school in Holly Springs, James Wells made sure that his children attended. Yeah, that's a lost art. I know I have to catch up on some chores. I hope in summer vacation we have a schedule of chores for our children. Our job was to go to school and learn all we could, Ida would say. Later, my mother went along to school with us until she learned to read the Bible. After that, she visited the school regularly to see how we were getting along. I remember hanging out in my son's classrooms, 1st grade, 2nd grade, just helping out, just being a parent volunteer. Yeah, it's good to invest those years, those days, as much as possible. Encouraged by both of her parents, Ida became a good student. She could handle schoolwork better even than some of the adults who were just learning to read after a lifetime of working in the cotton fields. But Ida saw that life was not good for all black people. There were places black people could not enter and jobs they could not get. If blacks were accused of crimes, they often would not get a trial. Some were even killed by angry white mobs. When a person was killed in this manner, it was called lynching. Ida saw the sadness and fear caused by the lynchings. In 1877, 16-year-old Ida was visiting her grandmother in another part of Mississippi when she learned that yellow fever had struck Holly Springs. Both of Ida's parents and her youngest brother died. My goodness. Heartbroken, Ida returned home. She listened as the family's neighbors and friends talked about what they could do to help raise the Wells children. That won't be necessary. Ida stood up as tall as her 5 feet allowed. I can take care of my family. It wouldn't be easy, Ida knew. They could live in the house that her parents had owned and would have the small savings that James Wells had carefully put aside. Ida decided to take a test to become a teacher. She had no experience teaching, but she had helped her sisters and brothers with their lessons. After passing the test, Ida taught in a small town 6 miles away from Holly Springs. A friend of the family agreed to keep the smaller children while Ida worked. Isn't this something? Young woman, leadership skills. Yeah, what are we going to do to cultivate what is within us? And sometimes life will push us in circumstances that we didn't plan, but still we can rise up. Look at her. Ida taught during the week and came home on weekends to do the washing and ironing for her brothers and sisters. Each Sunday night, Ida would ride back to the country school on an old mule. She worked in small schools around Holly Springs for 2.5 years. Sorry about that. But 2.5 years. And she was just so ambitious, helping her family. And she was a young lady, but she had genius within her all along. That's from her parents' hard work. Well, Ida's aunt, Fanny, lived in Memphis, Tennessee. I know where my dad was born. 43 miles north of Holly Springs. There were more teaching opportunities there. And in 1881, Ida, now 19, oh my goodness, she was really a teenager here, moved to Memphis with 2 of her sisters. Teaching was just as hard there. Ida had to travel by train to get to her job. She often used the time on the train to read or write letters. She read newspapers and whatever books she could find. She also began to keep a diary or a journal. Beautiful. She loved literary pursuits. One day, Ida took a seat in the ladies' coach of the train. The conductor refused to take her ticket and told her to move to the smoking car. Ida knew that the conductor wanted her to move because she was black. She refused. The conductor tried to pull her out of the seat. Ida was small. She braced her feet against the seat in front. When the conductor put his hand on her arm, she bit him. The conductor got 2 strong men, and together they dragged Ida from the car. Ida, very upset, left the train and went back to Memphis. Ooh, a feisty one, wasn't she? Yes, indeed. She was strong. Ida decided to sue the railroad. She won her case in court and was awarded $500. Oh, that was a lot back then. The local newspaper, the Memphis Appeal Avalanche, ran the story. The headline read, "Darky Damsel Gets Damages." Ida also wrote about the incident for her church paper, The Living Way. Judge Pierce, who was an ex-Union soldier from Minnesota, awarded me damages of $500. This was from The Crusade of Justice, her autobiography. How about that? Later, the court's decision was reversed, and Ida did not receive the money she won in court, but she did see how people reacted to the article she had written. Ida continued to write for her church paper, and soon black newspapers around the country began to carry her essays. She wrote under the name Iola and was called the Princess of the Press. T. Thomas Fortune, the noted New York publisher of the New York Age, wrote, "She has become famous as one of the few of our women who handle a goose quill with a diamond point as easily as any man in newspaper work." Come on. If Iola were a man, she would be a humming independent in politics. She has plenty of nerve and is as sharp as a steel trap. That's an old school term. I can remember my mom saying, "You got your nerve." Yeah. Or chutzpah. Confidence. By 1889, Ida had stopped teaching and wrote full-time. She even became part owner of a newspaper called Free Speech and Headlight. In August 1892, both her sharp pen and her nerve would be put to the test. Remember Frederick Douglass? What was that, the Abolitionist News? I forgot the name of his paper, but yeah, journalism, writing, literary power, it's in our bones and blood. The People's Grocery Store was owned by 3 of Ida's friends. A dispute occurred between the 3 and some white men who did not like the idea that black men owned the store. A fight ensued and shots were exchanged. The next morning, hundreds of black men were arrested, including Ida's friends. Several days later, the store owners were taken from the jail by a white mob and murdered. Ida was filled with grief and anger. She knew that the deaths of black men were often ignored. Longing for justice, Ida turned to the only weapon she had, her writing. What's your weapon today? Of power. In her articles for Free Speech and Headlight, Ida urged the black people of Memphis to leave town or stop supporting white businesses or riding the white-owned streetcar line. Ida Wells had organized one of the first economic boycotts. Yes, even before the Woolworth sit-ins. She was threatened and her friends feared for her life. When Ida left town to visit New York, her office was invaded by hoodlums and destroyed. This is what opened my eyes to what lynching really was, an excuse to get rid of Negroes who were acquiring wealth and property. I tell you. This picture, strange fruit. Ida was forced to leave Memphis, but she was determined not to be quiet or fearful. She began writing for the New York Age from her new home in Chi-Town, Chicago. Her articles exposed the poor treatment of black people, especially black men, more than any other person in America. She spoke and wrote about the crime of lynching. She believed that all Americans, black and white, were entitled to equal justice. You heard about the research study, and I was like, you didn't need a research study for that. They said that black men are the number one targeted. Well, they outnumber as far as police shootings of when they're unarmed, and they won out in comparison to Hispanics and Caucasian or whites. And I said, did we really need a research study for that? Did someone actually fund that? I mean, we know that. This is the history here. She believed that all Americans, black and white, were entitled to equal justice. Yes, we are all created equally. In 1893, she published a book on lynching titled The Red Record. Her good friend Frederick Douglass wrote an introduction to the book. Dear Miss Wells, brave woman, you have done your people and mine a service which can neither be weighed nor measured. Ida was invited to speak in England and Scotland. She spoke with eloquence and passion about the unfair treatment of black men. In the past 10 years, over 1,000 black men and women and children have met this violent death at the hands of a white mob, and the rest of America has remained silent. This was a letter from Ida Wells, B. Wells, to the editor of the Birmingham, England Daily Post, published May 16, 1893, from the Crusade for Justice, her autobiography. In June 1895, Ida B. Wells married Ferdinand Lee Barnett, an attorney and newspaper publisher. Susan B. Anthony, who fought so hard for women's rights, worried that Ida would give up her life as a crusader for justice. Ida replied, Miss Anthony, don't you believe in women getting married? She said, oh yes, but not women like you who had a special call for special work. Listen, I heard someone say, while you're single, you are whole. You are one of one. Don't let anybody, force you to do something while you have a special call, special work. When it's time, the right time, then you become one. But until then, you are a complete one whole. You don't need someone to make you whole. All right. I know of no one in this country better fitted to do the work you had in hand than yourself. Although she was raising her own family, Ida Wells did not abandon her role as a fighter. In 1900, The Chicago Tribune ran a series of articles recommending school separation. Ida asked for help from another brave warrior in the fight for social equality, Jane Addams. Miss Addams brought together a group of influential white business people to hear Ida plead her case. Ida Wells convinced them to help keep Chicago schools open for all children, not only the privileged. Although a wife and mother, Ida continued to write and organize. In 1909, she was one of the major speakers and organizers of the group that would eventually call itself the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Ida Wells understood that among African Americans, there were important differences. And we know Medgar Evers, who died 60 years ago today, was the first field secretary of the NAACP. So all of this is connected. Yes. That's why we don't have time to be complacent and idle. Ida Wells understood that among African Americans, there were important differences. Those who were powerful and doing well often weren't willing to make a commitment to help the poorest among them. They wanted to be respectable. Ida Wells also wanted to be respectable, but felt it was her duty to fight for justice for everybody, equity. I'd rather go down in history as one lone Negro who dared to tell the government that it has done a dastardly thing than to save my skin by taking back what I have said. That's what I'm talking about. Girl, use your voice. Ida continued her fight for justice by taking up the cause of suffrage, her friend Susan B. Anthony's lifelong mission. After talking to Anthony about voting rights, Ida was convinced that women's suffrage was critical to political change for black women. In 1913, Ida created the Alpha Suffrage Club. It was the first voting organization for black women in the state of Illinois. At Woodrow Wilson presidential inauguration of 1913, Ida and 5,000 other women marched for the right to vote. When white suffragists asked Ida to march in the separate colored section, Ida sternly refused, right? It took several more years of hard work by Ida and many others, but women finally won the right to vote, not until 1920. Ida Wells spoke up for what she believed. Her weapons were her keen mind and her pen. Leaders as different as W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey, the black nationalists, consulted her. In 1930, feeling that the candidates for the state's legislature in Illinois were not doing enough for the people, she ran for the state senate. She did not win the race, but again, her clear and passionate voice was heard. The following year, on the 25th of March, Ida B. Wells died. For more than a half century, this dynamic, intelligent woman used her writing skills to promote freedom, safety, and justice. She made America a better place. What are we doing? What am I going to do? And here's a timeline. I know you can be inspired. Oh my goodness, here's some more quotes. Take some time today to look up, I tell you, the heroes of the past. And I know they want to ban some of these books, but let us continue to read, to research, and to spread the word. Girls need more role models like Ida B. Wells. I say girls, boys, women, men, everybody. Because imagining they can be anything is just the beginning. Actually seeing that they can makes all the difference. Yeah, I concur. And this is by Mattel Toy Company. So let's go and inspire and do some more work. And like I said, we honor MichelleMurff Evers, who looks so good at 90 years old. And she continued her husband's work. And we want to continue the work of our foreparents and forebearers and our ancestors. Have a good day.